States was plunged into the Great Depression. People struggled to support themselves and their families across the country. It was even worse on the Great Plains when the drought came in 1930. The plains were sucked dry, and all that remained was dust, dirt, and grime. When the winds picked up in 1931, there were no crops or grasses holding the soil down. The Dust Bowl was born. A typical newspaper report of a dust storm read like this one from the Morning Chronicle in Manhattan, Kansas, on April 30th, 1933. Quote, "A high wind Saturday and Saturday night whipped dust clouds into the air, enveloping Manhattan in a haze, leaving a coat of dust on the streets and sidewalks, and even in the interior of buildings. Light showers in the morning failed to settle the dust." Unquote. Animals suffered alongside humans with one notable exception, the jackrabbit. They followed the dust and spread far and wide across the region, eating as they went. Today's video is part of the story of how they affected the Dust Bowl. In his book, Dust Bowl, The Southern Plains in the 1930s, historian Donald Worcester quotes Margaret Burke White describing the impacts of dust storms on plains animals. Quote, "In a rising sandstorm, cattle quickly become blinded. They run around in circles until they fall and breathe so much dust that they die. Autopsies show their lungs caked with dust and mud." Unquote. Dust storms left the dried-out husk of animals in their wake. One exception was the jackrabbit. Biologists aren't sure if their population increases during drought, but historically in Kansas, rabbits boomed in the 1890s, 1930s, and 1950s. All 3 decades were defined by drought. The human suffering was immense, and the jackrabbits only added to it. Farmers couldn't grow enough food, and the little they did was gobbled up by the rabbits. In 1933, Ness County, Kansas experienced one of those bunny swarms. The Fairview Enterprise reported in July that the crops around Utica weren't very good, but they were better than other places. The greenery was a beacon for jackrabbits. In the paper's words, quote, "The jackrabbits have been migrating to Ness County by the thousands and have started doing considerable damage to what crops there are." Unquote. There were enough rabbits that the Reverend W.B. Stevens in Dodge City observed that the fields were, quote, "simply alive with rabbits." The Hutchinson News warned eastern Kansas they were coming. J.B. McClure from Hutchinson reported that it was almost impossible to drive along some highways without killing them. There were so many rabbits that they devastated farmers' crops. In one case, large rabbits who were described as being, quote, "so weak from lack of food that they were wobbly when they arrived," ate about 12 acres of young corn. In another, rabbits ate 5 acres of alfalfa. Finally, farmers in Wichita County reported that jackrabbits were eating hundreds of acres of their crops. Multiply these numbers across the entire Dust Bowl from Texas to the Dakotas, and you will understand how big of an issue the rabbits were. So what did people try and do about them? It's simple. They killed them by any means necessary. In 1931, Kansas passed a 10-cent bounty on every jackrabbit in the state. The law required someone to turn in a scalp, head, or pair of ears to their county official. The county official had to destroy the body. The law was trying to avoid incidents where the same rabbit was turned in several times. The logic of the law was simple. If the state paid people to kill jackrabbits, more of the animals would die. In this case, people were already killing thousands of them without the bounty. Rabbit drives were common throughout the Dust Bowl. People would form a human fence and drive the rabbits into a small circle, killing them any way possible. The clubbing was particularly brutal. In one case from Odessa, Texas, people from Denver, Colorado complained about the cruelty. These drives were part of the fabric of communities across the region. In 1935, children in Winona, Kansas were let out of school early to go watch one of these drives. The scene was described in a letter by a grade school teacher named Gertrude. The letter was published in the Topeka Capital Journal on February 28, 1935. She described the scene saying, quote, "We dismissed at 11:10 for lunch, and at 12:10 filled the buses and took the children to the drive." She continued, "There were 6 buses full of kids, besides all the private cars in the neighborhood. I don't know how many rabbits were killed on these drives, but it could have been in the millions." Rabbits weren't all bad, however. Crops stood no chance against the drought, so people ate the rabbits. Many people didn't enjoy the experience. One paper quipped in 1931 that they found the perfect recipe for jackrabbits. All people had to do was boil a brick with the rabbit, and when the brick was tender, so was the rabbit. Rabbits did provide food in other ways, however. At least one farmer near Augusta, Kansas, fed rabbits to his pigs. The bunny swarms ended with the Dust Bowl in 1939. Thank you for watching, and if you have suggestions for future videos, leave them in the comments below.